A deal has been reached between the government in Ethiopia and the Tigrayan forces for a permanent ceasefire in the country's civil war. According to the World Health Organization, there are around 5.2 million in need of humanitarian assistance in the Tigray region, including 3.8 million who need health care.
It was a busy and crucial October for the peace ambassadors. There were lengthy deliberations in South Africa, and cameras rolled for the whole world to see.
As far as both parties are concerned, we have made painful concessions because addressing the pains of our people is far more important than the kinds of concessions we have made.
The people of Ethiopia expected more than the text of this agreement. They demand peace and harmony. They desire development. They have charted a promising and bright future.
And in less than 48 hours before the second anniversary of the deadly conflict between them in northern Ethiopia, it was time to show everyone that indeed some white smoke was emanating from Pretoria.
Today is the beginning of a new dawn for Ethiopia, for the Horn of Africa, and indeed for Africa as a whole.
Away from the glamour down south, many back home cannot just erase the treacherous 2 years of war. They chose to remember what was lost in the conflict through this ceremony in Addis Ababa. The breakthrough was hailed by various organizations, including the United Nations and the country's Prime Minister.
Today, I am pleased to commend the federal government of Ethiopia and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front for yesterday's signing of a permanent cessation of hostilities.
Very often after a peace deal, tricks and mischievous maneuvers are common. I implore you, the respected people of Tigray, our Tigrayan brothers and sisters, with the utmost sincerity, to play your role and duty of Ethiopian citizenship along with your other brothers and sisters, since we are ready to honor our commitments. I urge you to end here the trickery and mischievous activities of a very few. Enough.
For others, like Andom Ghebreyesus, a Tigrayan who fled to Kenya after the war, the scars of the bloody 2-year conflict between the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan forces are still fresh and run deep.
I left Tigray with my kids. The rest, they are there. I don't know what happened to them. It has been 2 years. I haven't heard anything from them. They live around the border with Eritrea, and that's the most unreachable place. No communications, no power, no banking system. I don't know even if they are alive. I don't know.
Ghebreyesus is among many who are cautious about trusting the lifeline of the accord, and just like he mentioned, the tiny northern country of Eritrea still poses a threat to both Tigray and Ethiopia. Forces that have fought alongside Ethiopian ones has not commented, and it was not immediately clear whether Eritrean forces had begun to withdraw. Troops from the country have been accused of breaching the borders and meddling in the conflict, at times provoking rebels into a war that was seemingly left out in the deliberations and could define the course of the treaty. For now, Mekele, the capital of Tigray, is adjusting to normalcy. Ethiopian media outlets ceased using the word terrorist to refer to Tigray authorities and forces. No sounds of gunfire have been heard for at least 2 weeks. The agreement says Ethiopia's government will expedite the provision of humanitarian aid and expedite and coordinate the restoration of essential services in the Tigray region within agreed timeframes. Enormous challenges lie ahead in implementing the deal, including getting all parties to lay down their arms. Ethiopian government and rival Tigray People's Liberation Front, who control the northern Tigray region, are in Kenya for talks over disarmament. Bureau Report, World of Africa.
South Africans are angry and shocked after a recent spate of mass shootings in public spaces. Experts believe that this is an old, ongoing phenomenon. However, they acknowledge that incidents are on the rise. Our reporter Kalmonglu has more.
The sounds of gunshots are heard almost daily in some of the communities in South Africa. Whether it's gang violence, robberies, political fights, you name it all. And to worsen the situation, this year the country has been marred with mass shootings. In the most recent incident, 11 street vendors were shot by unknown gunmen, while 7 died and 4 remained critically injured. WION spoke to some of the family members who lost their loved ones.
Our cops are not doing their jobs. Even after they got shot, a police van came, they tried stopping it, it just drove off. What the hell is that? They didn't even come and ask what's going on, they just drove off. Those people got shot at 9 o'clock, but then their bodies were picked up here around 3 o'clock in the morning. Around this, they were still lying there, they could have been saved.
South Africans feel poverty, unemployment is adding to the heinous crime.
South Africa is going down. The moment there's too much crime, it's more like there's no jobs. So even government can intervene and try to create jobs. Maybe crime will decrease at some point.
The South African Police Service statistics show as many as 6,424 people were murdered in South Africa in the first quarter of 2022-2023, up 12% from the same period last year. For the 6-month period between 1st October 2021 and 31st March 2022, there were 416 multiple murder cases involving 953 victims. In recent times, taverns and other small businesses in townships became the target of mass shootings. Experts feel the informality made them vulnerable and easily accessible to criminal elements. Also, lack of capacity and function by the police make these places an easy target.
The incidence of gun violence in South Africa very clearly points to a larger issue at play at the moment, particularly surrounding extortion and extortionist gangs who are using the lack of capacity and the lack of function by the police at the moment to do their bidding. South Africa has had high levels of violence for many years now.
Gun violence is not a new problem for South Africa, and this incident and other recent mass shootings have brought into focus just how unsafe the country is. Government says they are doing all in their power to nab the criminals, but how many innocent lives must be lost until permanent solution is found? This is Kalden Almu from Johannesburg, South Africa. For WION, World is One.
Kenya is witnessing its worst drought in the last 40 years. Hundreds of animals, including elephant and zebra, have died. It's a crisis that is threatening to impact Kenya's tourism industry that forms a significant part of the country's economy. The startling statistics come just as the UN Climate Summit gets underway in Egypt.
Catastrophic. That's how the World Wildlife Fund officials are describing the situation in Kenya. It's the worst drought the country has seen in 4 decades. The wild animals, perhaps the biggest casualties. More than 200 elephants have died between February and October. The young ones like these lie on the ground, dehydrated, too weak to even stand.
The drought has resulted in the deaths of the following species of wildlife. Wildebeest, we've lost a total of 512 animals. Common zebra, we've lost a total of 381. Our elephants, we've lost a total of 205.
In the last 2 years, parts of Kenya have witnessed 4 successive seasons of deficient rain, and that has resulted in a dire situation for people and animals, including livestock. More than 1.5 million cattle have died in Kenya alone. The devastating situation has impacted at least 4 million out of Kenya's 50 million people.
if the elephants can die, how about the cows, which are primarily grazers? So the pastoral communities are really in dire of another catastrophic situation whereby we are not only losing livestock, but we can also be losing people.
Some of the most visited areas of Kenya, like Amboseli and Tsavo, are among the worst affected. Tourism contributes about 10% of the country's economic output and employs over 2 million people. Experts are calling for an urgent aerial census of wildlife to assess the impact of drought. The authorities are dropping off hay for the animals, and sporadic rainfall has finally started in the region. But Kenya's Met Department has predicted a below-average rainfall for much of the country, raising fears that the crisis may not be over yet. Bureau Report, World of Africa.
The Nigeria Governors Forum is worried about the high rate at which medical doctors migrate from Nigeria to countries like the United Kingdom annually due to brain drain. The continuous exodus of health workers has led to a manpower crisis in health facilities across Nigeria. Statistics reveal that in the first 9 months of 2022, over 1,300 Nigerian-trained doctors were licensed in the United Kingdom. A 2022 UK immigration report shows that over 13,000 Nigerian healthcare workers, including doctors, were granted work visas in 2021.
I have a lot of friends that left recently, and I still have a lot that are still, trying, doing all possible things, every means they can to leave the country. So the health sector in Nigeria, me that have practiced in US here, and thinking about back then in Nigeria where I practiced, the health sector is a different thing, is a different scenario. So I'll really say I don't blame those that are leaving, my colleagues that have left, I don't blame them.
24,000 doctors are available to Nigeria's 218 million population, instead of the 363,000 recommended by the WHO. Lack of job satisfaction, poor funding of the sector, and poor remuneration are believed to be the primary reasons of this brain drain.
As of 2009, a dollar was going for about 80 to 100 naira. Was about 80 to 100 naira to $1. And today we are talking about 800 naira to a dollar, 800 and something. So you have 100% depreciation in the value of what we are being paid. And that is how you will know whether it is fair or not. The third thing is the issue of lack of job satisfaction. And this comes from a poor working environment and lack of equipment. When you cannot stay comfortably where you work.
While the sector counts its losses, practitioners look at the bright side of the brain drain. If the government makes an effort to make the sector competitive to attract migrants back.
Of course, they are not going to come back without the knowledge they have acquired. And of course, even the, what we call linkages, okay, they have met friends there. They have also met people that have the wherewithal to invest, and those that also produce state-of-the-art equipment. So they will come home with those linkages, which will benefit us in research and, of course, knowledge sharing and patient care.
I told them that even if I will travel outside Nigeria for studies or to work, that at some point I am going to go back to Nigeria to make a difference. Because it's not just leaving our father's land, it's not just running away, Japa as we always call it, but we have to look back at where we started. If all of us should leave our healthcare in incompetent hands, I don't think that there will be a difference in the future.
It is believed that Africa, which has 25% of the global disease burden, has only 3% of the global healthcare workforce, and it continues to lose up to 70% of their healthcare workforce to migration.
Nigeria currently contributes a great number of healthcare workers to the UK, Canada, and other high-income countries. While some analysts see this movement as a gain, others consider it a drain. Beyond the healthcare and banking sector, other industries are having a fair share of the mass exodus of high-skilled professionals to Western countries, as experts have called on government to ensure that they reverse this trend. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olaniyi, WION, World is One.
A report by India's Exim Bank says the country should leverage Southern Africa's rare earth minerals as the world looks to the continent to fulfill the ever-increasing demand for them. The region is richly endowed in lithium, graphite, cobalt, nickel, copper and other rare earth minerals. Calden Ongmu explains the Exim Bank report in detail.
The recent report by India Exim Bank, titled Reinvigorating India's Engagements with Southern Africa, has suggested India needs to form strategic alliances with Southern African countries where critical rare earth minerals are produced, as the world looks to the continent to fulfill the ever-increasing demand for them. Africa has the potential mineral resource to compete in the global arena. Currently, the world's REE market is largely controlled by China. Take a listen to an expert on his views about this.
Firstly, there are very few projects that are being developed in Southern Africa will actually get into production. This is just due to the difficult nature of rare earth projects from a mineralogy and the complicated extraction processes which lead them to not be able to extract rare earths on an economic basis. As I mentioned, there are only a few projects that will be able to attain this that are currently being developed in Southern Africa.
Some of the world's major consumers like the US, the EU, Canada, Australia and Japan are looking for alternative rare earth element supply chains, and Africa with its potential could be used as an alternative source of REE commodities. Now it's up to the region to devise whether or not they want to develop their own REE value chains. This is Calden Ongmu from Johannesburg, South Africa. For WION, World is One.
The COP27 is underway in Egypt. World leaders converge to discuss and come up with effective strategies to limit global warming and carbon emissions. This as Egypt is battling multiple climate-related crises. In the latest, farmers are now turning to solar power to reduce farming costs and emissions. Take a look at our next report to know more.
Climate change and its impact is evident in Egypt, particularly on the Nile River. Once worshipped, the Nile now faces existential threat, a water source that 10 countries rely on for their irrigation systems, drinking water needs and power. With the Nile at risk and rising energy costs, farmers in the delta are now turning to solar power.
Many places here are out of the reach of the electricity grid, so farmers depend on diesel fuels, which is really hard to get. As it costs a lot of money, we are talking about a huge amount of fuel, not just a few liters, as the land needs huge amounts of water, which in turn requires a lot of fuel. Additionally, the machine needs new oil every 100 operating hours, not to mention maintenance fees. This is why farmers are turning to solar energy.
Solar energy is proving to be an effective and successful solution. It has helped not just reduce the operational costs, but also contributes to lowering CO2 emissions. That being said, many farmers do not have the resources and the funds to install solar panels, and this is where the UN-financed solar panels have come in handy.
Most farmers in Egypt irrigate their lands by raising water from canals using motors, which consume a lot of energy and leads to increased CO2 emissions, which we try to reduce.
Every year for the past 6 years, the Mediterranean has eaten away between 35 and 75 meters of the Nile Delta. Over 500 million people rely on the Nile. But climate change, human intervention, exploitation and pollution have put the Nile at risk. According to reports, the flow of Nile could reduce by 70% by the end of the century. Needless to say that this has raised concerns, and Egypt is feeling the pressure to rethink its climate goals. Under Egypt's 2030 vision, the government intends to increase the supply of electricity generated from renewable sources to 42% by 2035. With COP27 underway in Egypt this time, there will be strong focus on the need for damage and loss payments by rich countries. It remains to be seen if rich countries with significantly higher emissions will unite on decarbonization goals, and if they will help developing nations that have faced disproportionate impacts of climate change. Bureau Report, World of Africa.
That's our time on this week's episode. Check out our social media platforms to watch the show and give your feedback. Thanks for watching World of Africa. I'm Alison Lagrange, and this is WION World is One.